So after Midway, he's anyways promoted to command of the third Japanese fleet, which provides support and the withdrawal of the Aleutians. And we really see him in 1944, where he's given command of the first mobile striking fleet, which is supposed to be the last striking force of Japan. And he suffers quite a few defeats in the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf. But at that point, the guy's pretty much done the best he could with what he had. There's even the U.S. historians knew that. The U.S., for example, at the Philippine Sea, he chose the correct way to attack the United States Navy that was supporting the invasion of Saipan. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was where Philippine Sea was supported.
Yep.
And within that, he knew he had at least the range advantage. And he utilized that because otherwise, if it was in, say, complete combat effective range of the United States Navy, he's toast. Granted, he also suffered from horribly faulty intelligence of the Japanese naval forces on ground. And I think his greatest success definitely was Leyte Gulf, where his Northern Striking Force, as it is called, successfully baited Halsey and Mitscher's forces.
Definitely.
And that gave the opening for a near total disaster for the US Navy. But in that sense, the guy did his job bang on. The military record won't look good, but with the resources that he had and the odds he was up against, it's quite a very impressive thing what Admiral Ozawa did. So just wanted to put his name out there.
All right. And for worst admiral, I don't think anybody's going to be surprised. And I just want to say off the bat, I do not think he was a bad admiral, but I have to pick somebody, and I think it just made the most sense. He's also quite infamous. It's, of course, it's Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, the man who many would claim lost the Battle of Midway. Although I think it's a little harsh. It's not that it wasn't completely his fault. We'll just say that. What to say about
I mean,
him?
if you want to put the fault, it's pretty much a lot of the Japanese senior command,
Including Yamamoto for that matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because Yamamoto had this great idea of a clockwork mechanism battle.
Yep. But to add some nuance, instead of just talking about the Midway debacle, which everyone focuses on, let's look at Nagumo as a person. He graduated from the Imperial Japanese Naval Academy in 1908. A bit on the older side, mind you. He specialized specifically in torpedo warfare and, of course, surface operations. He rose through the ranks due to showing a good amount of skill and leadership. He would command various destroyers, cruisers, and battleships, gaining extensive experience in surface naval combat. He was a commandant of the torpedo school, and he refined Japan's focus on torpedo technology and tactics using torpedoes. So
Long
again,
plans.
yeah, you should notice there is nothing about aviation in there, and that's something to take a notice of. As anyone would point out who knows a little bit about him, he is an extremely overly cautious commander. A lot of people point out that he missed the supposed third wave during Pearl Harbor, which absolutely was not a fault or an error. He made the right decision not launching a third wave. People who don't
It
know
was
so much,
just,
yeah.
yeah, I was just saying it would just cause unnecessary casualties because by then the US have completely woken up.
Yeah. I'm not going to name the person, but there is somebody that I brush shoulders with quite often, another YouTuber who likes to comment on Twitter, that this was the pivotal moment the Japanese could have really done damage, is if the third wave destroyed the oil tanks and all that. And I keep reminding this guy, the way that the oil tanks were made in Pearl Harbor, there was no way that a medium, a light Japanese dive bomber could do anything to them. They wouldn't light on fire. Even if they managed to destroy one of these oil storage tanks, they weren't made in such a way that they would start exploding the other ones. And the fire teams in Pearl Harbor were actually really good. They would have put it out. There was no hope of taking out the oil, just to say, not go down the rabbit hole. But on top of that, like you mentioned, the casualties incurred on the second wave for the Japanese were getting pretty high. And if the Japanese launched a third wave, not only would the casualties be really bad, they might have a lot of guys.
Game.
Yeah, the guys might have had to ditch at sea because they had to get out of there, and they had no idea where the American carriers were, and those carriers could have attacked them. definitely was a possibility. I think if the American carriers came to attack them, it would have actually been bad for the Americans. So I think they would have lost two carriers. But needless to say,
Yeah. But
yeah.
I just add one thing. One of his fellow admirals and one of his friends, Admiral Shukahara,
Mhm.
he said he was also surprised that Nagumo got the job as the chief of the naval air arm of the
Yeah.
Japanese Navy. He says, his background, his training and experience and interest
Yep.
were all completely not suited for the role.
So
And
yeah.
and Admiral Yamamoto's preferred choice was actually Admiral Ozawa, who
Hmm.
knew the weapons quite well. Ozawa had training with naval aviation and experience.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, Nagumo only gets his job just on seniority basis. And let's also call it out that Nagumo and Yamamoto, they detest each other like probably
Yeah.
like, Yamashita and Tojo kind of hatred.
I wouldn't say it was that far, but they were opposites. Yamamoto
Yeah.
was very
Okay, fair enough.
bold. I wouldn't even call him aggressive. He was bold. He took the initiative. He understood how plans could move and shift, and he tried to think outside the box. Nagumo,
Nagumo,
the best way to describe him is he is a by the books officer. He takes commands from the top and he follows them. And whatever the pre-battle plan was, is the only thing he goes by. He can't make decisions otherwise. I mean, of course he'll have to, but he really doesn't want to. He does
it's
not like to
he
take the initiative.
unless it's absolutely forced upon him, he's
Yeah.
not going to do it. It's mechanical. If he
Yeah.
really, I would call it a mechanical, nothing
Now,
else.
now Yamamoto very much understood how to use Nagumo. He's like, okay, whatever I tell this guy to do, this guy is going to do, no matter what. And that's could be of a benefit. That can also be terrible. Because if you can't trust a guy you're delegating, let's say, something that might be important, like the entire Kido Butai to, the guy can't think outside the box. Well, it could go to disaster. And like you said, Nagumo, he was picked because of seniority. I mean, like, let's look at it, one of his counterparts, Fletcher. Again, Fletcher, a large part of why he's in the role he's in is seniority. And it's who you knew. Nagumo was probably liked by a lot of commanders, maybe in the army, by the way. And he was seen as a choice that could equalize Yamamoto because there were a lot of people who hated Yamamoto. So maybe making Nagumo the leader of, the Kido, maybe that was kind of like a way to punch Yamamoto. I don't know. But unfortunately, Nagumo ends up being, the commander of the first air fleet, the Kido Butai, without much of a background in naval aviation. I guess he had to become a quick learner. And he oversees Pearl Harbor. And you know what? For the first 6 months, on paper, Nagumo is the most proficient commander of the Japanese Navy because he oversees
He,
all of these great things, you know?
the Ceylon raid, I think, was one of his
Yep.
biggest and not heavily talked about operations.
He had the bombing of Darwin and he had the Indian Ocean raid, like you just said. So he two amazing raids. And I mean, this is after Pearl Harbor. He sees all these other operations. He's running rampant. And up until the Battle of Midway, I think you would argue Nagumo is a solid A-list admiral and he can be depended upon. Unfortunately, during the Battle of Midway, even though he brought up the issue that might unfold, what if the Americans somehow get their carriers in and surprise them? Well, that ends up happening. Nagumo famously faces a dilemma, which is actually to this day called Nagumo's dilemma. And the Battle of Midway is in part lost because of this, but it was flawed from the very beginning. I think we would argue Nagumo's not responsible for the Japanese naval codes to be leaked, and decrypted. And the fact that they were walking into an ambush in the first place. But Nagumo is definitely guilty of not acting quickly enough. And, had he believed in his reconnaissance maybe and not kind of dragged his foot a bit, things could have gone differently. But
I think I would just add the Japanese preparations for the operation because they had absolutely no idea that their codes were broken.
yeah,
Even the recon effort that he puts out by his supporting cruisers and aircraft before launching the strike on Midway Island is how do you expect 13 aircraft to look at hundreds of thousands of miles of ocean,
yeah, yeah.
square miles of ocean? It's half-hearted. It's just 13 aircraft.
And you know what? If I were to throw something else out there to defend Nagumo, Nagumo, again, he's a by the books guy. Doctrine for the Japanese as well as the Americans. You have a proper air squadron formation and it goes in and attacks. Was he to expect the Americans would all of a sudden absolutely batshit crazy throw piecemeals at them? No, he would not have expected this. Unfortunately, he should have, once the reports started to come in, figured something was up. And I don't think he's completely at fault, but most people, if you're putting him on a list, they're going to say, yeah, it's Nagumo's dilemma. It's Midway. That's why he's the worst admiral. And you know
I
what?
think the only thing was just his lack of ability to take the initiative or think on his own, right?
Yeah, that,
As they say, your plan is your first casualty of war.
yeah. And much like one of his counterparts, Fletcher, he's disgraced from Midway, and then he's shuffled around, and he's not going to be seeing as prestigious commands anymore. And then he'll end up killing himself at the Battle of Saipan, which, yeah, that's the end of him and his career. And I guess that's why I would put him as the worst.
It's what I find really funny is you have the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, where actually both Fletcher and Nagumo pretty much lose their active naval commands after that.
Yeah. And stating that, are we now on to a different faction?
Yeah, that's got an honorable mention.